Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And my cards for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, which there's still time to play along with this challenge. My video's just late life. Anyway, I will have a link directly to the challenge in my blog post, linked directly below the video. We're going to do some really simple, I did ink blending and adding splatter with just the inks. I didn't use any extra products this time. Ended up making two slightly different cards using a lot of the same products. And like always, links to everything I use will be listed and linked directly below the video. My links are affiliate links, so if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It's what helps pay the bills, keep the channel running, all the things. And yeah, let's get into making these cards. So I'm using the beautiful Buttercup little die set. This die set comes in the August card kit from Simon Says Stamp, and I will have videos linked in the end screen, one of which has the unboxing of the kit that shows this set, and then I did another video using this little die set. This set is available individually as well, and I'll have links to all the things like I always do with all the supplies. So I die cut it a whole bunch of times from Simon's Smooth White cardstock. And then I'm sticking all of these die cut pieces to my great big Altenew Ultra Sticky Mat, just to hold everything in place while I add color. And for the stems, I just used Simon's FAIRWAY ink and just a large blending brush, slapped on the color. Not worried about any sort of smooth coverage, anything like that, because one, it'll smooth out as it dries, but also I will be adding texture with water and then inks and all that sort of a thing. And then I had split up all the blooms into two sections for two separate colors. And this first top section, basically, I'm using PEONY ink and just a smaller blending brush and just kind of pulling the color from the top downwards, letting it just fade to white. Super simple. And I'm doing the exact same thing with the bottom section. This time I'm using SUNBEAM ink. And once I've got all of the color that I wanted added, I'm going to take my distress sprayer and I'm going to just mist it and also press the nozzle only halfway. That gives you big, more splotchy bits over all of these pieces. And because these inks are water reactive, it will create some texture. You won't get as intense of, sometimes when you lift water from things you've ink blended with water reactive inks, you'll get more white space. Because I'm just using regular cardstock, you're not going to get the same effect. If you use watercolor paper, usually the ink will lift a whole lot more. And so you can't see it as much on camera, but in real life, it still creates that texture. You can see the little tiny speckly bits from the water, and I just love that. So I let that sit. After I sprayed it, I let it sit for a minute, and then I just used paper towel, pressed it against all the die cuts, removed it. That soaked up the water. And then to add more texture, I'm using the exact same inks that I did for the blending. I'm not doing anything with the stems because they're tiny and it doesn't matter. It's just the blooms. And I'm just taking my pieces of paper towel to kind of protect the other ones so I don't have to take them off the grip mat. It's easier this way. So that keeps the splatter from getting onto the other ones because I wanted to keep the same color to each element. So I'm using the SUNBEAM and I just smushed the ink pad a little bit against one of my little plastic palettes, added a bit of water, and I'm just using a really small paintbrush and adding that splatter to all these blooms. And this will create a much more subtle effect because I'm using the exact same ink color that I blended with, but you still get the texture. So if you want it more intense, more obvious, I would just use a darker shade of ink, a deeper yellow, that sort of a thing, or you could use things like distress paint, etc. But again, I was just going more for just creating that bit of texture without it being super busy, super obvious. Again, it always just depends on my mood. So I'm doing the same thing with the pink flowers. I just smushed the edge of the PEONY ink pad onto the palette, added a bit of water, and then covered the areas, and then realized that I wasn't paying attention and setting down my palette moved the paper towel. So I ended up getting a couple little splotches on one of the yellow flowers. Not a big deal. not too worried about it. Perfection's overrated. But yeah, just swirling the brush in the color, and then just tapping the brush with my fingers and creating all this little splatter. This does get a little messy because I don't have it in my splat box, obviously, but it was still pretty. As long as things are like protected, it's fine. It's fine. So did all the little splattery bits, let everything dry, which didn't take very long at all. And then I just wipe down my grip mats. You clean them in the same way you clean your photopolymer stamps. So I just wipe them clean, or if I feel the need, I will use a photopolymer safe stamp cleaner. But yeah, that's it. Just wipe it clean, set it aside. And then assembling these flowers is super simple. You just adhere the smaller piece to the larger piece, and then you adhere the stem. That's it. If you want to like add extra dimension, you could add a little thin like foam square, between them as well, just to pop up those layers. But I just added adhesive kind of towards the bottoms of the layer of the flowers and left the top portion without any glue. So it does just kind of naturally pop up a tiny bit. And then I add my little stems, and you just repeat. Because I did a lot of these because I wanted to do, a large cluster, and then I ended up with enough that's why I ended up making 2 cards. So I've got all my flowers assembled. And then for the background for the first card, I'm using just another panel, the same smooth white cardstock. And this time I'm using CADETTE ink and blending that onto this panel, starting at what will be the bottom. So just holding it sideways and then blending the ink, and again, just letting it fade to white. And then once I'm happy with the blend, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to spray it with water, let that, sit for a minute so that the water can kind of soak up a bit of the color, press a paper towel into it to remove that water. You can see it a bit better here, the effect it creates. And then I let that dry, and then I'm going to add splatter with that same ink. So the CADETTE ink, smushed it onto my plastic palette, add a little bit of water, and then splatter it. And same thing, I protected all my little die cuts, etc., that were sitting like kind of right above all of that. So protected those with that paper towel, and then just added my little bits of splatter here. Let that dry, and then I'm going to trim this down. It was originally A2 size, but I took 1/4 inch off all the sides, so it'll be smaller than my A2 card base. So trim that down. And then for my sentiments, I decided, by this point I knew I had enough like florals to do more than one card. So I pulled out 2 wafer die sentiments. I'm using the CZ design, like the U wafer die. This is part of the newer release, and had die cut the word 3 times from white cardstock, adhere those together. And the other one is an oldie but goodie favorite. This is the Scripty Hello wafer die. Now this one, and I've talked about this in videos, because this is a more delicate word wafer die, I've die cut it 3 times, but I'm only adhering 2 layers together. Then these layers, the 2 layers, I'm going to adhere on top of the vellum outline that I die cut from vellum. And then the 3rd layer, I'm going to adhere to the back. This will, 1, pop the vellum up just a smidge, but also it makes it a lot easier to adhere it to your card base, because I'm dealing with a more delicate die cut here, and trying to hide adhesive behind vellum is not the easiest because it shows through. But having that piece of the die cut cardstock on the back, I can add the adhesive to the cardstock and not have to worry about it oozing out onto the vellum, which I'll show when I adhere it to the card front. And then for the large U word, I blended it the same way I blended the background. So using that CADETTE ink, just keeping it the color more concentrated towards the bottom, and then just lightly blending it up towards the top of it. And then doing the exact same thing. I'm going to add a bit of water splatter, which I will speed up the drying of with my just my heat tool, because I don't like adding splatter after you've like sprayed anything with water. If it's still damp or wet on the cardstock and you go to add other splatter, the other splatter can like bleed out, and you end up with like splotches instead of like actual splatter, if that makes sense. So I dried that really quickly and then added the blue splatter, just like I did on the background. And then once that was dry, adhered that to the outline that I'd also die cut from vellum. So once I've got my sentiments ready to go, I'm going to start assembling my card fronts. So this larger one, this is where I've got the whole cluster, just a whole row of these little Buttercup die cuts. And I kind of laid them all out off camera, figure out how I wanted them to be, and then just adhere them directly with just my craft tacky glue, because there's already the layers of the die cuts, as well as me like layering them on top of each other. It's already going to create a lot of dimension. If you want extra dimension, same thing, you could pop them up with little foam squares, things like that. But got them all adhered, flipped this over, trimmed off just the stems along the bottom. The parts hanging off the sides are fine because they won't hang off the edge of the card at all. I'd made sure just to let them hang over just a little bit, and then after I had everything trimmed off, I grabbed some baker's twine from my stash, wrapped that around this card front, and then, like always, you start the knot. I use my reverse tweezers to hold it in place while I fiddle with my bow so I can get it the way I want it. And then once I'm happy with that, I can pull it tight, remove the reverse tweezers, pull it tight again, trim off the excess of the tails, and then to adhere the die cut sentiment, like I said, I can now add the adhesive, and that's going directly on that cardstock on the back. So I won't have any oozing of the glue onto the vellum, because it just, yeah, you can see it, So this prevents it. So got the adhesive into place, stuck that onto the card front, and then off camera I actually just stuck something heavy on top of that just to hold it in place while the glue dried, and it was good to go. And then my card base, top folding A2 white note card, 5.5 by 4.25 inches. And I'm going to use the coordinating sentiment set, the U sentiment set. And I'm going to ink up the large U word. I showed this in a recent video. Just using a blending brush. It just gives it a little bit of a softer look than inking up directly, which I'm going to ink it up directly for the other cards, so you'll see the difference. So inked it up just with my blending brush and that same Cadette ink. Ended up doing this twice just because I had little fibers and stuff stuck to the stamp, so it was a little bit splotchy. So inked that up, and then I'll add the little companion sentiment right below the word, and that I'm going to ink up with the PEONY ink. So I'm probably going to use this. You guys are going to see me use this stamp set a lot. I love buildable sentiment sets, ones where you can build different phrases, and I find I get way more use out of them that way. So stamp that with the PEONY ink, and then I've got a couple more of my little buttercups, because I don't even know how I cut it 7 times, something like that. I had so many, so I had extras for the insides as well, of course. So I'm going to adhere a couple to the inside of this card, again, just using craft tacky glue, and flipping it over again once I've got these adhered into place, just to trim off the little bit of the stem I have hanging off the bottom of the card here. So got that done. And then for the card front, I trimmed down just a couple pieces of thick cardstock. Just depends on my mood. Foam tape works great too. I just didn't want quite as much dimension as foam tape, just a smidge. Plus it makes everything adhere a little bit more evenly because of that baker's twine in the way. So I just adhered those pieces to the back of that panel, and then adhered this to the card base. And card number 1 is almost complete. We'll add bling at the end, of course. And then for the second card, this one is going to be another top folding A2 card, this time a 4.25 by a 5.5. And then this one, I'm inking up that U word on the inside directly with the ink pad. Much more intense than inking it up with a blending brush. And then inking up the rest of the sentiment with that PEONY ink. And then a couple more of the little floral die cuts on the inside as well. So get those adhered into place. And then once these are adhered, same thing. I flipped it over, trimmed off the excess with my scissors, removed any of the glue I got on my work surface, because that generally happens. Don't want that sticking to my card. And then for this one, I'm going to adhere everything directly to the card base, but I need to stamp my little sentiment first. So I kind of figured out where I was going to place the large U word, and then put this back into my MISTI so that I could stamp the first part of that sentiment with that same PEONY ink. And if it didn't stamp very good, or if I messed it up, I was like, oh, I would have stamped it separately, die cut it, adhered it on top. There's always, there's usually a backup plan, but it worked. We're all good. So once those are stamped, then I just need to adhere my little floral die cuts. So I'm just going to adhere them with, again, craft tacky glue. And then to adhere the die cut word, because I've got the layers of die cuts there to make this one adhere nicely, plus, again, give it just a smidge of extra dimension. I'm just using thin foam squares. I don't do this very often. I talk about this. I don't like messing around with foam tape behind die cut sentiments because I do not have the time or patience. But this is a chunky sentiment, and I didn't have to trim any of the little foam squares. So works. So I put those on the back of that and then pop that into place. And then I'm going to add more baker's twine. I had some yellow baker's twine, also my stash, that just went nicely with this color combo. So same thing, wrapped it around the card front, used my reverse tweezers, tied it in a bow, trimmed off the excess, good to go. And then as my final bit of embellishment for these cards, I've got the Starshine confetti, so clear confetti. Goes with everything. So sprinkled those throughout both of these card fronts. And then once I was happy with where I had placed them, I'm going to adhere them into place again, which is dabs of craft tacky glue. Just picking them up with my little embellishment wand, pressing them down into the glue. And then I just got to let the glue dry, and both these cards are complete. So kind of clean and simple for the most part. Not so much maybe the first one, but the second one, definitely more clean and simple. Not something I do very often, but the colors were fun. I really love this little Buttercup wafer die. It's just so cute. And of course, can't go wrong with any Kathy Zielski sentiments. They're always perfection. So those were the cards. Like always, I will have links to all the supplies I used in the description box below the video. The link to the Color Throwdown Challenge will be in the blog post that is also linked directly below the video. So you can check out all that info directly below if you're interested. Thank you all so very much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribing, all the things. And yeah, I'll have videos linked in the end screen for you guys, and I'll see you very soon in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in supporting me over on Patreon, the link to that is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye.